Hey guys, tonight we dive deep, way deep, into a world you probably won't survive, but I promise, just listening from your comfy spot is perfectly safe. Imagine you're standing on a planet that looks nothing like today's Earth. The air smells of strange minerals, the sky might loom a little duller, and around you, the land stretches out, not as the familiar continents you know, but a gigantic supercontinent called Pangaea. It's a massive landmass, almost like Earth decided to fold all its continents into one colossal block. Ocean currents are strangled around this giant climate system's spin in odd ways, and life, well, it's both thriving and teetering on the edge of chaos. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments so I know who's joining this late-night journey across deep time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The late Permian period, roughly 299 to 252 million years ago, is where we start. Picture this. You trudge across a sprawling landscape where deserts nibble at inland seas, massive mountain ranges rise from shifting tectonic plates, and forests of strange plants, including towering seed ferns and ancient conifers, spread their foliage under skies that veer between hazy sun and ominous clouds. Here, Earth has one giant landmass, Pangaea, but the weather shows wild swings. Sometimes blistering heat scorches the plains, other times bitter cold grips the poles. It's a place of extremes, and this tension sets the stage for what historians still argue about even today. What sparked the most devastating biological crisis in our planet's history? You wander through this ecological theater where amphibians the size of small cars lumber near swampy wetlands, and strange marine reptiles glide through shallow seas. Insects like giant dragonflies buzz overhead, and corals build reefs in ancient oceans. The air feels thick but breathable, though not exactly fresh by modern standards, since oxygen levels hover slightly lower than what you're used to. This setting is crucial. Think of it like Earth's calm before a storm so intense, so worldwide, it nearly ends complex life altogether. Yet, at this precise moment, that huge volcanic rumble in Siberia is only a faint whisper beneath the surface. And Earth's story, your story, is about to change forever. You're now stepping closer into the heart of the Permian world's vibrant life party, and trust me, it's quite the scene. On land and sea, countless species are buzzing, crawling, and swimming in an intricate daily dance that's as complex as a modern rainforest or a coral reef. Maybe it's hard to imagine, but life back then was spectacularly diverse, even if the creatures don't look anything like what you'll see today. Giant early reptiles stalk the forests, amphibians weigh more than your average car, and enormous insects, some with wingspans wider than your hand, flutter and hunt at dawn and dusk. In the oceans, life is equally busy. Corals build calcium carbonate reefs, though they look a bit different than the ones you might snorkel through today. Ammonoids, those coiled-shelled cousins of modern nautilus, flourish with their complex chambers and rapid reproductive cycles. Brachiopods, those shelled creatures somewhat like clams, carpet the seafloor in incredible numbers. Weird creatures called trilobites, who once dominated the seas, have almost vanished by now, survivors of an earlier extinction, serving as a reminder that mass die-offs happen again and again through history. Yet, amidst the bustling energy, something feels fragile, almost like a grand house of cards balanced on an unsteady table. Oxygen in the air dips lower than in your time, hovering around 21% or less, making it harder for some species to breathe easily. Around you, vast swampy forests release huge amounts of carbon into the atmosphere, setting the stage for climate instability. The seas teem with life that is sensitive to even minor changes in chemistry or temperature, a fact that you might find comforting until you realize how close this balance is to breaking. Here's a somewhat quirky fact you might love to tell at your next gathering. Some of the large amphibians back then were so bulky and cold-blooded that they likely basked under the sun for hours, soaking warmth like giant lizard-shaped solar panels, kind of like a prehistoric version of your morning routine. But unlike your coffee habit, this strategy might not save them once the climate starts to swing wildly out of control. Historians and scientists still argue whether these enormous amphibians and reptiles were the prime movers of ecosystems' resilience or vulnerable links waiting to break under environmental stress. One thing's clear: the Permian ecosystems are an elaborate puzzle, and every piece is fragile, interdependent, and about to be shaken by a catastrophic event that will alter life's course forever. Now, imagine a low, almost imperceptible rumble vibrating beneath your feet. Not the kind of earthquake you can run from, or a storm that sends you diving for cover, but an ancient, slow roar from deep within Earth's crust. You're standing near what will one day be Siberia, a region that right now doesn't look all that remarkable. Dense forests, rolling hills, and yet, hidden beneath, massive volcanic activity is about to reshape everything. These volcanic eruptions, some of the largest in Earth's history, start burbling out flood basalts, thick sheets of lava that will eventually cover millions of square kilometers. You probably think volcanoes erupt explosively like Mount St. Helens or Hawaii's Kilauea, but these great Siberian eruptions are different. They ooze out slowly but relentlessly, lasting for thousands of years. The eruptions release an epic amount of gases: carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and even methane. The sheer scale is staggering. For perspective, historians still argue about exactly how long these eruptions went on, but they could have spewed lava and gases for over 1 million years, transforming the atmosphere and oceans step by step. As the volcanic gases pour into the atmosphere, sulfur dioxide causes a kind of acid rain that begins to fall across the land and ocean. You stand under a sky darkened not just by ash, but by a chemical haze that starts to choke plants and animals alike. The sulfur aerosols first cool the planet by reflecting sunlight, but soon the excess carbon dioxide steps in to gas everything up, pushing temperatures higher and higher. It's a slow-motion reaction, like your kettle left on the stove for too long, which means the environment changes in fits and starts, often too subtle to see until the damage is already underway. Here comes a quirky tidbit. Some researchers suggest that the Siberian volcanism might have even caused a bizarre type of crocodile dung sunscreen, a sticky substance formed by burnt vegetation and volcanic debris that temporarily shielded some plants from sunlight before the full impact struck. It's like Earth's desperate attempt to slap on some SPF 100 as it fell into a climate crisis. Scientists still debate whether the volcanic eruptions alone triggered the mass extinction, or if other factors, like methane released from oceanic clathrates, or even a possible asteroid impact, played key roles. What's undeniably clear is that this volcanic awakening was a catalyst, a megavolcano on rampages, signaling a slow march toward ecological disaster that you're about to witness firsthand. You start to notice subtle changes as the atmosphere quietly turns against you. The air feels heavier, more acidic, like breathing through a thin veil of invisible poison. Sulfuric acid rain falls from overheated clouds, biting into the skin of plants, washing toxins into rivers and oceans. The greenhouse gases pumped out by the Siberian volcanoes trap heat like an enormous, poorly calibrated sauna. Temperatures begin creeping up, sometimes surging suddenly, turning your once scene of diverse life into an increasingly hostile environment. Oxygen levels, which you might have taken for granted in your corner of time, begin to drop noticeably. In fact, in some oceanic zones, oxygen nearly vanishes entirely. Imagine trying to breathe in a crowded, poorly ventilated room. Marine creatures that rely on oxygen either flee or suffocate. Many can't adapt fast enough. Dead zones spread beneath the surface, where life struggles to exist in chemical soup. The seas, usually cradles of life and renewal, transform into toxic graveyards. Even on land, this creeping toxicity isn't something you escape. Acid rain and falling temperatures create a deadly 1-2 punch. Just when it seems the acid might do the worst damage, the greenhouse heat waves spike, baking the land and intensifying droughts. You find strange, withered plants, unable to photosynthesize properly because the atmosphere's been corrupted. Without plants, the animals that depend on them for food begin starving, and the effect ripples across ecosystems like a bad ripple in a once perfect pond. Here's a creepy bit of fringe science for you. Some studies speculate that massive clouds of hydrogen sulfide, a poisonous gas smelling like rotten eggs, might have billowed from the oceans during this time, further poisoning the air and even causing ozone layer depletion. Breathing outside during these surges would have been deadly. You probably still won't survive this, but hey, you're listening safely in the 21st century, so you're winning. Historians still argue whether these atmospheric changes were primary causes or accelerants in the extinction, but it's clear they exacerbated the environmental stresses to a lethal point. You watch as the stage is set for a mass die-off, where the oxygen supply acts like a failing power grid, switching off life's delicate systems piece by piece. You find yourself drifting beneath the ocean's surface now, where things are getting much worse, fast. The seas, once abundant with life and color, begin to sour. The chemical balance of salt, oxygen, and nutrients shifts alarmingly as greenhouse gases seep into the water, turning vast stretches into what scientists call anoxic zones, places utterly devoid of oxygen. In these underwater dead zones, marine creatures suffocate just like you would if trapped without air. Fish and invertebrates alike vanish from these regions, unable to cope with the toxic environment. Coral-like organisms falter, their calcium carbonate skeletons dissolving in increasingly acidic waters. You glance around and notice the vibrant marine ecosystems, once alive with ammonoids flitting around and brachiopods barely clinging to rocks, slowly disintegrating like sand castles before a relentless tide. Big marine reptiles, fierce and formidable, feel the squeeze of a shrinking habitat as their prey disappears. This isn't some sudden kraken attack. It's a slow, creeping extinction that gnaws at the foundational species of the ocean. Since these marine ecosystems are intricately connected, when one group disappears, the effects cascade. Imagine a set of dominoes stretched across a massive aquarium. The collapse of tiny microorganisms upsets larger fish populations, which in turn wrecks the feeding chains of massive predators. It's a systemic crash, the biggest ecological meltdown the planet has ever seen. Here's a quirky twist. Some tiny marine creatures, like certain types of microbial mats and tube worms, seem to thrive in these inhospitable waters. These extremophiles feasted on chemicals raining down from above, kind of like how bugs might party at a garbage dump. They were the weird survivors of an ocean apocalypse, holding on when others couldn't. Scientists still debate the exact timeline. Was the turning point in the oceans sharp and sudden, or a drawn-out process with fits and lulls? But as you hover just beneath those once rich waves, it's clear the marine world is unraveling right before your eyes, inch by painful inch. You climb out of the poisoned sea and trudge across barren, toxic lands now. On this ancient Pangean landscape, the once lush forests and wetlands are shrinking fast. Giant amphibians, those bulky, awkward creatures you might call the weird cousins of modern frogs, wobble desperately through diminishing swamps. The air, thick with volcanic toxins, stings their sensitive skin and lungs. Reptiles, some just beginning to evolve into species that one day would rule the earth, feel the squeeze too. Their territories shrink like deflating balloons as droughts parch the once fertile soil. You spot strange therapsids, mammal-like reptiles, scuttling nervously among fallen trees and cracked mud. Even these tough survivors face growing challenges from drops in oxygen, rising temperatures, and the toxic cocktail raining down from volcanic plumes. You might remember that acid rain we talked about. It's doing a number on the plant life too. Without plants to stabilize the soil, erosion takes over, and dust clouds sometimes swirl like ghostly storms across the barren plains. It's like the earth is shedding its skin, but the process is ugly, slow, and painful. A quirky fact for you here. There's evidence suggesting some of these extinct reptiles could regulate their body temperatures more flexibly than modern reptiles, perhaps giving them an edge in coping with extreme climate swings. But like a sunbather relying on fleeting shade in a scorching desert, this adaptation only carries them so far as conditions worsen. Historians still argue how much the shrinking habitats contributed to the extinction versus the direct toxic effects. But one thing's unmistakable: life on land is facing a relentless pressure cooker. Every species struggles not just with heat and poison, but also with the ripple effect of ecosystems collapsing. Some plants and animals show surprising resilience, but you feel how close this web is to unraveling completely. Walking through this dying world, you realize the uncomfortable truth. The great terrestrial creatures that once dominated may soon be ghosts beneath your feet. It becomes harder and harder to find solid ground beneath your feet as everything that keeps ecosystems humming begins to unravel. Picture a fragile network of interlocking cogs suddenly grinding to a halt. Food chains, those invisible lifelines connecting plants, herbivores, and predators, start breaking down, one link at a time. Without plants thriving on the land or phytoplankton buzzing in the seas, herbivores starve and predators face empty tables. The entire web teeters on the edge. You see scavengers and opportunists try to survive by shifting diets or habitats, but for many species, adaptability can only stretch so far. The specialist feeders, those perfectly tuned to certain prey or plants, vanish first. If you cast your eyes over the landscape, you realize even the top carnivores are struggling to find food, their populations thinning like patchy grass after a dry storm. This collapse doesn't happen overnight, but unfolds over thousands of years, a grinding disappearance rather than a sudden wipeout. You feel a haunting silence replacing the buzzing jungles and clamoring seas. Carcasses litter the ground and drift in the water, remnants of ecological systems no longer able to sustain themselves. Microbes multiply on decaying matter, while larger animals fade into extinction, leaving gaps that can't be filled. A quirky fact: some evidence suggests certain carnivorous species resorted to cannibalism as food sources dwindled. It's a chilling reminder of life's desperation when survival becomes the only goal. That, and yes, makes you appreciate your ready-made meals, or even that leftover pizza, a little bit more. Historians still argue about how exactly food web breakdown accelerated the Permian extinction. Was it a slow attrition, or a tipping point where one collapse triggered total ecosystem failure? But anyone walking this dying world would sense the overwhelming fragility of life's interconnected threads. And as those threads snap one by one, everything teeters on the brink. You step into what scientists call Earth's darkest day. At the peak of this catastrophe, the Great Dying, an estimated 96% of marine species and around 70% of terrestrial species vanish from existence. Imagine losing almost everything you see in front of you. Not just the big animals, but tiny microorganisms, plants, and entire groups of creatures wiped out in geologic heartbeat. The Permian extinction isn't just a disaster. It's the ultimate survival test, and most life fails miserably. The seas, your underwater realm moments ago, are now vast graveyards where once teeming coral reefs have crumbled into ghostly rubble. On land, forests are now skeletal remains, and animal tracks become rare and forlorn. The delicate equilibrium of life collapses, and the planet seems to be gasping for balance. You can almost feel the eeriness, the kind of silence that presses against your thoughts, a reminder that Earth was once home to spectacular creatures that simply blinked out of existence. The disaster is so thorough, it's like the reset button on evolution got slammed down hard, wiping the slate nearly clean. Here's a quirky little surprise. Among the wreckage, some tiny hardy bacteria thrived, including sulfur-eating bugs that may have further poisoned the atmosphere by releasing toxic gases. These microbial survivors essentially took over in the absence of larger life, turning ecosystems upside down. Historians still argue whether this extinction's rapidity and sheer scale were due solely to environmental catastrophes like volcanism, or if other factors like an asteroid impact added fuel to the fire. Regardless, there's no doubt the Permian extinction is Earth's most devastating biological crisis, one that reshaped the future dramatically. So here you are, standing in the aftermath of apocalypse, a planet almost void of complex life, waiting for whatever comes next. Amidst the overwhelming devastation, you might expect all life to simply vanish. But surprisingly, some strange survivors cling to existence. The weird and the unexpected. As the giant amphibians and reptiles dwindle, smaller, hardier species find ways to hang on in pockets of refuge. It's kind of like when you think all the food at a party is gone, but there's a hidden stash of chips and dip no one knows about yet. These survivors include tiny insect groups, burrowing animals, and some hardy microbial communities that manage to eke out a living in the harshest conditions. Even some spiny, armored plants push through barren soil, showing a remarkable stubbornness. Certain proto-mammals and early archosaurs, ancestors of crocodiles and dinosaurs, start to picture new evolutionary paths, their fates entwined with resilience and adaptation. You might find it surprising, but one group of peculiar creatures, the Lystrosaurus, a pig-sized dicynodont therapsid, practically dominates wasteland after the extinction event. They're like the cockroaches of the Permian apocalypse, tough, slow, and incredibly persistent. Their fossils are found worldwide, signifying their extraordinary spread and survival against all odds. Here's a quirky note. Some surviving species apparently had anti-freeze-like proteins in their blood, helping them withstand climate extremes during and after the crisis. It's like carrying your own built-in survival kit, nature's ultimate multi-tool. Historians still argue how much these survivors shaped the recovery versus how much was just luck. But it's clear these stragglers set the foundations for life's comeback. You see sparks of hope in these tiny, gritty pockets, life's stubborn echo slowly gaining strength from the ruins. So here you are, caught in the middle of one of the toughest scientific debates about the Great Permian Extinction. What exactly caused such an unprecedented near-total collapse of life on Earth? Was it the gargantuan volcanic eruptions in Siberia? The sudden release of methane from frozen clathrates? Maybe an asteroid impact crashing in somewhere remote? Or was it a perfect storm where all of these played their part? Volcanism remains the frontrunner for many researchers. Those colossal flood basalts released vast amounts of CO2 and sulfur dioxide, choking the atmosphere and triggering climate chaos. But some scientists still argue whether it was enough on its own to plunge Earth into such catastrophe. Others point to methane. This frozen gas locked in ocean floors could have been released in massive bursts, supercharging global warming and ocean acidification. If you imagine Earth's climate as a temperamental beast, methane might be the spark that pushed it from angry growl to full-blown rampage. Adding to the intrigue, some studies highlight geological signs that an asteroid or comet impact may have coincided with the extinction. Evidence is still sketchy, though, and the debate is as heated as an erupting volcano. Scholars continue to analyze sediment layers, isotopes, and fossil records, hunting for definitive smoking guns. Here's a quirky thought. Imagine Earth's ecosystems as a complex clockwork, where one gear jams, then another, and suddenly the whole system goes haywire. This metaphor helps frame why historians and scientists argue for a combination of causes, a multi-factor catastrophe rather than a single villain. This ongoing debate fuels discoveries and deeper understanding of how delicate and interconnected Earth systems are. For you, witnessing this perplexing puzzle isn't just about geology or paleontology. It's about grasping the raw power of nature and how even the mightiest life forms succumb to forces beyond their control, at least for a time. You stay with the Earth as it slowly begins to recover, but don't expect a fast fix. This healing takes millions of years. Think of it like a slow, delicate wound dressing rather than a dramatic miracle cure. After the Great Dying, The planet is a shadow of its former self, with fragile ecosystems barely clinging on in pockets of refuge. The oceans take particularly long to regain their former vitality. Those anoxic zones, the oxygen-deprived dead patches, gradually shrink as volcanic activity quiets and carbon levels stabilize. Slowly, coral reefs, our ancient underwater cathedrals, begin to rebuild, though they look different, shaped by new environmental rules. Phytoplankton, the ocean's tiny green factories, come back to dominate the seas, kickstarting new food webs. On land, survivors like the hardy Lystrosaurus and various early reptiles spread across Pangaea's fragmented landscapes. Forests slowly recolonize barren areas with seed ferns and conifers, but the climate remains volatile, cycling through extremes. You notice that evolutionary innovation kicks into high gear as life adapts to the new normal, creating diverse forms that will shape future ecosystems. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scientists speculate that early recovery ecosystems featured disaster taxa, species that thrived in disturbed landscapes, like ecological first responders. It's like nature's version of a triage team rushing in after a brutal accident. Historians still argue about how exactly these recovery processes unfolded and what environmental factors helped or hindered them. Was the slow rebound caused by lingering toxic atmospheres, or by the fragmented continental arrangements? Whatever the case, it's clear Earth's resilience is pushing back against extinction's shadow. You witness a planet at the crossroads of destruction and rebirth, where life's stubborn pulse continues, slowly but surely. You now trace the profound legacy of the Permian extinction, feeling how it shaped the grand flow of evolutionary history. The mass die-off wiped the slate nearly clean, erasing dominant lineages and opening ecological doorways for new players to emerge. Think of it as a cosmic game of musical chairs, where most contestants suddenly disappear, leaving fresh seats for those bold enough to adapt and claim them. With the mammal-like therapsids and various reptiles among the survivors, the stage was set for the future rulers of Earth, dinosaurs, mammals, and birds, to rise. The dinosaurs, especially, took advantage of newly available niches, evolving into countless species that would dominate in the Triassic and beyond. Meanwhile, the mammalian lineage slowly began its long, winding journey toward becoming the diverse group we know today. Even plants were reshaped profoundly. Gymnosperms, conifers and their relatives, expanded across the recovering land, creating new habitats for animals. These greener, needle-leafed survivors were better adapted to the more variable climates that followed the extinction event. Here's a quirky note. Some early crocodile-like reptiles thought to invade new niches may have had a semi-aquatic lifestyle, blurring lines between land and sea survivors. Imagine predators toggling between water and land like amphibious action figures exploring post-apocalyptic playgrounds. Historians still argue how fast these evolutionary radiations happened and whether ecosystem complexity ever fully returned to pre-extinction levels. The truth is, the Great Dying rewrote evolutionary rules significantly, and its aftershock echoed through millions of years, gently guiding life onto new pathways. You stand at the crossroads of past and future, witnessing how extinction fosters rebirth, and how Earth's story is one of continual transformation and resilience. Now, as you look backward and forward through the lens of time, you start to see striking echoes between the ancient Permian crisis and the environmental problems we face today. You might feel a chill realizing that some of the warning signs back then, climate change, ocean acidification, widespread habitat loss, sound eerily familiar. It's like the Earth is trying to send us a message from deep time, a cautionary whisper across millions of years. The mass volcanic eruptions pumped enormous greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, trapping heat and acidifying oceans, just as burning fossil fuels do in your modern age. Oxygen depletion, dead zones in the oceans, and collapsing food webs are trends not exclusive to the distant past. Scientists even point out that modern emissions rates might rival or exceed some of those ancient pulses. Here's a quirky but sobering tidbit. Some researchers use the Permian extinction as a worst-case scenario blueprint for what could happen if greenhouse gases remain unchecked. They sometimes call it Earth's hard reset button, something nobody wants to press again. It's a grim reminder that long before humans, Earth's systems could get pushed beyond their limits, with catastrophic results. Historians and environmental scientists still argue exactly how directly we can learn from ancient extinctions, given differences in timescale and human impact, but the parallels are impossible to ignore. Your survival depends in part on understanding these lessons written in stone and fossil. So as you reflect, maybe it's not just a story of past death, but also one of urgent hope, a reminder that the Earth is alive, responsive, and that the choices made today ripple into the future. Now, as the echoes of devastation start fading into the gentle murmur of recovery, you find a quiet, almost humbling hope shining through the shadows. Despite everything, the near annihilation of life during the Permian extinction, life's stubborn resilience becomes the star of the story. Some lineages, small and unassuming at first, gradually adapt, innovate, and spread across the recovering Earth, hinting at the incredible durability of nature. It's as if life whispers to you through time, "Don't count us out just yet." The survivors' grit, mutations, and slow but steady reclaiming of habitats set the stage for new ecosystems. New species arise, ecological networks rebuild like carefully woven tapestries, and Earth's myriad forms of life diversify again, although forever changed. The Permian event might have been a crash, but it was also the soil from which future forests, dinosaurs, mammals, and eventually humans would grow. Here's a soft and quirky thought to hold on to. Life after the Great Dying probably looked very shadowy, strange, and wild, kind of like a nighttime forest where unknown sounds stir your imagination. But it's that darkness which makes every new shimmer all the more precious. Historians still debate how long full recovery takes and whether certain groups now dominant would exist without this extinction. But it's clear the Earth bounced back with vigor and creativity. You get a sense of intimate connection to deep time's vast rhythm, where extinction and rebirth form a continuous circle. So, as you prepare to drift away now, remember, Earth's story is not just one of loss, but also of hope, adaptation, and endless surprise. No matter how dark the night gets, dawn awaits, patiently and inevitably. And now, as the day's intensity softly fades behind you, imagine yourself lying back in a quiet room, where the gentle hum of a fan brushes against your ears like a distant lullaby. The stories of ancient worlds, fierce disasters, and struggles for survival gradually slow to a whisper, wrapping around you like a cozy blanket. You breathe slowly, deeply, feeling the steady rhythm of a planet that has endured so much and yet still cradles life in its loving arms. The colors of the Permian world, stark deserts, shadowy oceans, and forests both lush and dying, start to blur at the edges, turning into gentle shades of twilight. The creatures you met, those giants, survivors, and stragglers, begin to dissolve into the soft haze of memory, their stories etched in stone but now quiet enough to let your mind rest. Every fossil you imagined, every tiny microbe that eked out a living in Earth's darkest hour, becomes part of a vast, silent chorus, telling a tale of resilience that hums beneath the surface of time. You might find peace in knowing that even the greatest crises carry within them the seeds of hope, that after every shadow, life whispers back with fresh breath and new light. The Earth's long story is one of endless transformation, a slow dance between destruction and creation, where you are both witness and participant. So close your eyes gently, feel your body soften, and let the timeless rhythm of this ancient planet soothe you into calm. Tomorrow is another day, just as this ancient Earth knew, full of mystery, challenge, but also endless possibility.